this thing. Here we go. There we go. Right. So I'm Paul Gravett, and I'm helping this year to coordinate the British guests. As you may be aware, Great Britain is the guest country. We're very happy to be here, very honoured, and we're mostly behaving. We're mostly behaving. And we've got a lot of exciting artists and authors here. I do suggest that you check out the exhibition. It's in the main Congress Hall, and there are almost everybody invited. Of course, is doing various talks. In fact, shortly after this one, at about, where are we now? 1 o'clock, I'm going to be interviewing Rob Davis at the Institute Cervantes about his adaptation of Cervantes' Don Quixote, which is an incredible graphic novel that's been published in German. And later on this afternoon, Dave McKean, who is here signing, will be in conversation, I think possibly here actually, with Reinhard Kleist, who I'm sure you're familiar with, and that'll be a very interesting encounter. And that's part of the idea behind the festival. I think it's quite good to have British and German artists meeting each other, not just British artists coming in and talking on their own. It's quite nice that we can put people together who really ought to meet and whose work is really kind of in harmony and where there's a real fit. And I think a very interesting conversation can happen. I'm hoping it will happen. So in many ways, I'm redundant here. I did say to both Barbara and to Posy that really I would just stand back and over to you, but I'm going to be here to kind of facilitate and probably answer the one question at some point. But so welcome. So let's just give a round of applause to our very special guests, Posy Simmonds from London and Barbara Yelin. Now you will have noticed, I don't need to point this out of course, but I will point this out, that they are women. This is not something we should gloss over, because in my observations of comic cultures around the world, wherever they are, this is an evolutionary stage that has to happen for any comics culture to really blossom and become fully mature and original and wonderful, basically. And it is happening in many countries, some slower, some faster than others. The country with the most women creators in the world of comics, of course, is Japan. They've had them at least since the 70s, and there, comics for all ages of women, by all ages of women, are very established. Over here, it's also happening, it's developing clearly, there's that, but it's still something that needs to develop more. And because we know women read a lot more than men, that seems to be borne out in most countries, and they should be reading comics, but of course they've not necessarily read them that much because they've been made mostly by men and deal with violence and war and superheroes and stuff that women obviously do like. I mean, women do read those comics, but they also, women can bring a lot of other things that perhaps men haven't got around to talking about. Slice of life, humanity, heart and soul, and just basically a different sensibility which has been for many years rather missing. Certainly over the longer history of comics, it's been underrepresented. So I'm thrilled that this is happening. I'm hoping that maybe next year or 2 years' time, whenever the festivals in the future here in Germany will have more women taking part. And probably also more women presenters. I'm rather redundant myself, really. But I'm an honorary woman here for the next hour. Good. So we're going to start. We've got an initial image, a very appropriate one, not drawn here this morning by Posy at the Comic Salon, the Comic Festival, but it could have been. Perhaps you could explain, Posy, a little bit about well, I'm actually ask you to explain this. Yes.
Well, first of all, ich freue mich sehr, hier in München zu sein. Es tut mir leid, dass meine Deutsch nicht sehr gut ist.
Well, bravo. Du bist ein Münchner. Yes, du bist okay.
This cartoon is just a thought for the day. Yes.
Okay.
So, right from the very beginning, when I was small, I've always done comics. My first ones were quite violent. There were bodies by the second frame. And I'm going to write, there are a lot of images on this. Some of them I'm going to rush through. But anyway, there's...
Just before you go, I just want to create the dialogue here. Did you start drawing comics very young, like Posy? Did you make your own comics?
Well, I was...
And do you still have any?
Sorry.
Do you still have any comics like the ones we were looking at just now? Early ones?
Well, when I was a child and a teenager, I didn't draw comics. I always drew, but not comics. But I discovered comics, these comics that animated me to really go into that. I discovered them when I studied. And I have still. Of course.
So what age were you when you were comics? When you began comics, what age were you?
19.
Okay. Because these are a good deal earlier. What age are you here?
I'm probably 9 or 10.
Yes, precocious.
But I've always, after I went to art school, where I mainly did typography, I then began looking for work, and I went around every newspaper and magazine publisher and publisher I could think of to show my work. And very early on, I was really what we call in English a dog's body. I was just filling little holes in the page, or sometimes they were big ones. So this was the first drawing I did for The Guardian, and sometimes I did political ones, and sometimes I did things on the sort of features pages, sometimes on the letters pages. I lived near the paper, so in those days, of course, you had to go into the paper, pick up the copy, read it, and do the drawing, and do it, and then run back with the ink still wet by 5 o'clock. I'd been at this dog's body for about 5 or 6 years, and the editor of The Guardian had a great big hole on the women's page, and he asked me if I would like to do a strip, which would be a half page every week, and it would somehow reflect the lives of Guardian readers, but particularly women. And at that time, which was in the 70s, there was a lot of women's change in women's lives, equal pay, which is still a bit of a joke, but all sorts of new freedoms were happening. So that time on the paper was very exciting.
Can I just ask you, because if I remember rightly, the comic that you were replacing, am I right, was Verushka?
Yes, that's right.
Now, you may not remember, was the Verushka was a bit like, well, it was a very kind of, it wasn't really an appropriate comic for the women's page, really, was it?
Absolutely, it was about politics.
But it had an awful lot of cleavage.
Well, yes, of course, we took issue with that.
Yes.
We took issue.
But it was quite a pop art kind of comic strip, wasn't it,
yes,
really, in the 60s, and that came to an end.
That came to an end.
Yeah.
Yes, he went to America, leaving the big hole.
Yeah.
Which, first of all, this is one of the very early ones, which is like cricket. Anyway, I didn't know who any of the characters were because it began very quickly, and I'd invented a lot of characters because I thought there was safety in numbers. But I got the husband in bed with the wrong wife. And so every week there was something like this. This dealt with the fact that you can blame always everything on your mother, so that you can have the most vile murderer, but if you knew that his mother was cold, it's her fault, really. Or that if she was too clingy or couldn't cut the cord, it was also her fault. And
it's worth mentioning, of course, as people can see, this is not a newspaper strip. This is a full large space. Large space. I say a big hole to fill, really.
Yes, it was a big hole to fill, which is why I wrote rather a lot. But I could chop it up in all kinds of different ways. So I'll go through. That's what it actually looked like in the paper. The printing was never very good, so it was always rather grey. There's Mrs. Thatcher being Mrs. Thatcher, and so on. I mean, The Guardian let me be very free. I could choose to do exactly what I like. The only time I was ever censored was really for using bad language. But now in the paper, I mean, anything goes, even the very short Anglo-Saxon words. So the Guardian's women's page has now been going over 50 years, but it's a sort of institution, and people used to be very frightened of Guardian women, thinking that they set fire to men's trousers and things like that. We didn't. Not very often. Sometimes I did the odd political thing. I was sent to cover an election, so that would be in the paper. It had to be done very, very fast. Sometimes I got to do a story. So this is Cinderella set in an old folks' home, and the slipper is left in the snow. Very early on, I did I suppose it would be a kind of graphic novel.
Graphic novel avant la lettre, as they say, before the term properly
yes.
established anyway.
I was asked to write a cartoon story.
Because you had collections, you showed them Mrs. Glover's Diary, that was the characters in the family that developed as a recurring series in the comics. And you had a book collection of those come out.
Yes, that's right. Yes.
And then from there was the idea of
doing
an original book, an all-new book.
An all-new book, which is... and I very much like the cartoonist, he was Spanish, wasn't he? Those romance comics of the 60s, which always had girls with they had triangular mouths with a sort of darker triangle in the middle. They'd be, and that,
very long eyelashes.
And long eyelashes. And so a lot of it was a pastiche on that sort of thing, with an ordinary girl, but she does get off with the most handsome man in the world, who she's dancing with, and he is called Cliff Duff.
So had you read those romance comics?
Yes.
When growing up? Yeah.
Oh, yes. I love.
Because there was a whole school of Spanish artists that were employed by British publishers.
Yes.
And they were tremendous illustrators. Just very glamorous.
They were terrific. I'm going to go faster because I realise I'm taking up. But I've also done children's books, and I studied typography, so that came in useful for doing my lettering. I seem to like cats. This is an oppressed cat, a very oppressed worker cat. More cricket, I seem to like cricket. This is rather rude. Some jolly schoolgirls. And eventually, in about 1997, The Guardian asked me if I would like to do perhaps something different. And I said I'd like to do something with a beginning and an end, like a story. And they said, okay, we'll give you 100 episodes, and we'll give you... well, maybe it comes later. We'll give you a space which is 3 columns wide by the depth of the paper, so very long and thin, like a giraffe. Which is, to me at first, I thought, because I was used to a horizontal strips on, like that. But anyway, I got used to this space and actually came to like it very much. I found it, you could sort of zigzag down it, and you could change, you had plenty of time at each turn to either have a different character, a different thought, a different sense of time. It was quite nimble. The character of Gemma came from looking at Princess Diana, who was alive at the time. And because I very much wanted my heroine to have pupils, because often I did dots for eyes, but I wanted her to have the full job. I wanted her to look out at the side of her eyes and under her fringe, like Princess Diana did. And that's really how I work always, first of all, in a notebook before I really write anything. And this story I'd chosen was really based on Flaubert's Madame Bovary, but the heroine transposed into an English girl who, like many English, go and buy a house in France, and she will get into debt like Madame Bovary, and she will die like Flaubert's heroine. And in my sketchbook I had to do things like, she had to undress in a rather English way. This is how I would work. It was before, well, I'm not very good at computers anyway, so I would kind of sketch things out. This appeared every day in the paper, and I hadn't finished it when I began. I began with about 20 episodes done, and that's how it looked in the paper, the same episode. And the Guardian's sort of strapline said that it was a story of adultery and soft furnishings. And that's the very first episode with the narrator, who's French, Monsieur Joubert.
I can ask you, you must have had, well, maybe you had, did you have the whole story planned? I mean, do you know what your ending was going to be?
Well,
did it actually transform as you were doing the daily episodes and gradually falling slightly behind?
Yes, I fell badly behind. I took my guide was Flaubert, I mean, sort of. It was homage of Flaubert, but I took tremendous liberties with his story. And of course things changed. For instance, the ending was supposed to be the Gemma taking her own life, committing suicide. And I drew these drawings with her taking pills and her note, and somehow she wouldn't die. And I kept going, die. And in a way she kept sitting up and saying, no, I don't do this. And I realised it was true. Her character had evolved so that she simply wasn't a suicide. So then I had to kill her. Go on. And there's been a recent film made by a French director, which hasn't come out in England, but it's I think it's come out in France, with Gemma Arterton as Gemma and Fabrice Lucchini as Joubert. The same thing happened with Tamara Drew, except times had moved on a bit and there was colour, and the format I was given had changed, so that it was it appeared once a week, 2 episodes in the literary bit of The Guardian. And the same thing happened. I took a 19th century novel by Thomas Hardy and kind of brought it up to date. So these are from my sketchbook, just studies for tomorrow. That's how it looked in the paper. That's Tamara's first, that's really where she first appears in the story, wearing very small shorts, which the sisterhood would not approve of.
Can I ask Posy, the name Tamara Drew, I mean, I want to know this, but is there a reference in the name, in the same way there is with Gemma Bovary?
Yes, the Drew is the past tense of draw, so in a way she's a kind of catalyst, she draws people towards.
And the Tamara?
Tomorrow there was going to be a bit, but I didn't have room, about Tamar in the Bible, which is a terrible story, but it didn't happen, so tomorrow. This is from the film by Stephen Frears with the same actress as in the Gemma Bovary.
This could get confusing if Gemma Arterton goes on playing all of your heroines in films, I suspect.
She won't want to be in the next one, I think. And this is just from my sketchbook. I'm going to go quickly here. This is the American Glenn, who I saw in a real lecture. I liked him very much, so he became Glenn. Got sort of American hair. These are the teenagers, Jodie and Casey, who I went around various places in southern England. There's a very beautiful bit called Dorset, which is where the book is set. And there they are. They spend all their time in a bus shelter, reading terrible magazines.
Were you lurking in the bus shelter with them to overhear their conversation? How do you pick these things up?
I never overheard.
Do you hang out with the youth?
Well, I sort of did too, but in a very sneaky way. I mean, I would see these bus shelters, which were usually covered in. I had to clean this bus shelter up because the graffiti was so rude, and for a family newspaper. But I
think we should explain those. These are bus shelters where a bus will never come.
Yes, these were all over this very beautiful bit of England. The bus shelters were full of teenagers, catatonic with boredom. And sometimes I would get out and I would ask them, when's the bus coming? And they would reply, there is no bus. But it was really where they hung out. They hated the country, which was full of beautiful farmhouses, full of rich bourgeois weekenders and huge cars. And they, I really felt for them. They were, so that's why I wanted two characters. So I would listen to how they spoke, but not, on buses actually, they used to yell into their phones, so I wasn't being creepy. And so there they are in the beautiful landscape, and hating it. Drawing a graphic novel is a bit like drawing a film, so you have to, as well as the characters, you have to do the location. So I did, I did drawings of bits of landscape, which then came into the, and this is actually a spread. And what I like about comics really is when they're silent, when there's no balloons, where you can move along image by image. But unfortunately, in the newspaper, I didn't have enough episodes to tell it in a certain bit of it in a silent way. This is the way I work, which is on a huge A2 pad, allowing me to scribble, and the big scribble in the middle is when somebody rang me up, and I just had a big scribble. This is the way I write. On the right-hand side, I ask myself, what's happening in this episode? I write down everything, including all the dialogue. Things I miss out in the centre column. Then I rewrite it on the left, making it as concise and short as possible. And I might do this 3 or 4 times, so that the narrative is really tight. And it says everything I want it to do. And then I write it out, and my husband's a typographer, and I give it to him, and he sets it. So it's all done in the house. So this is very quickly an episode from beginning to end, a little floor plan of the farmhouse where Tamara lives, where she is waiting the arrival of the lecherous and adulterous Nicholas, who is coming to see her. And she's a journalist, so I've got to have her writing and waiting, and the doorbell to ring, and for Nicholas to arrive. So those were my instructions. So that's the next stage, writing a bit of what she's writing, and scribbles at the bottom. Then I get a bit of more into the drawing, which is sort of done in thick black pencil. I like working in pencil. That's the drawing complete with the thing at the top, and that's the finished thing. So it's, and that would probably take, that was probably two days' work.
May I ask, how do you do the colors? It's aquarelle or it's watercolor?
It's a mixture of everything. It's watercolor, it's crayon, it's sometimes gouache, sometimes snow opaque. Because I'm so bad at computers. I'm not very good at Photoshop. No, I can't do that. So I use up a lot of snow opaque and glue. And students roll their eyes at me and go, "Oh God, you could save yourself so much trouble." And maybe I'll learn. So this is what I'm working on next, which is set in London. And this is why Gemma Arterton won't want to be one of the heroines.
That will need some special effects, won't it?
And just notebooks. I draw people in the street. I draw. I was got very fascinated by all the different styles of Muslim dress, and sometimes I work out other ideas for later on. And yes, we end where we begin with the 7 ages.
I mean, in theory, where would you put Tamara and Gemma in this 7 ages? I suppose they are there, are they, in age number 2, really?
I expect they'll be on.
You've added more, but perhaps with the new book you'll be adding something to stage 5 or 6 or something. Perhaps we need more older women appearing, perhaps in novels. Wonderful. So we can, if someone can help me switch this. Oh yeah, we're going to swap things. Should we do that? But then we'll still keep the conversation going, won't we, from there? Marvellous. I think we're fine, because I think you know how to swap it over. We're going to give musical chairs. Here we go. So thank you for Posy. We ought to see that, because most of you, I imagine, are only maybe just about discovering Posy at the moment, where, of course, in Britain we've had her for years. In fact, Raymond Briggs very, I think quite realistically forecast at one point that you will be, and we think you should become Dame Posy Simmonds. Would you accept, what is it, an OBE or something like this? What is it that turns people into dames? I don't know. Would you ever consider yourself to be the grande dame of British graphic novels?
No.
Would you accept such an honour of that sort?
The Queen has to sort of point a sword at you.
Yes. But saying that, you were inducted into the Royal Society of Literature, weren't you, a few years ago?
Yes, I was. And I was
so you have some honours.
Given the special handshake. Actually, I'm joking, there's no special handshake.
But that was another example of recognition, I think. Yeah.
That was nice.
Good. So, Barbara, in a way you have your career, while it's different and distinct, there are some interesting connections in the sense that Posy, of course, has adapted Flaubert and Thomas Hardy, and in this case, the book we're looking at here, Gift, is based on a real story, a true crime novel, I believe. Did it exist already as a novel? Is that correct?
This was a true crime case from the 19th century, and Permita, the writer, it was not a novel. He really did a proper scenario, so already a script.
Written for comics.
Yes.
And what is his background? He's a novelist and writer normally. He hadn't written comics before.
He wrote plays, theatre plays, scripts, and he did already, I think, 2 or 3 comics scripts in the 80s or 90s.
I guess writing for theatre is perhaps slightly closer to comics than writing novels.
And he did also a documentary book about that case, so he was very involved in that case, and so in his research, doing research about that. First of all, I want to say, because this was so fantastic to see your work. When I found your books several years ago at Reproduct, this was really inspiring for me. So it's so great to share this.
When I saw your book, Barbara, I was, this beautiful, but I was really blown away by it. It's bravo, it's wonderful.
Right, that's enough gushing. Oh, you're wonderful. It is. I think I can see echoes of of Posy's work in your work, I think. Yeah.
So really, yeah. So because when we still have a female comics artist collective. It's called Spring.
Yes,
yeah, we do this each year since 12 years. So now since 2 years I'm not taking part anymore, but I'm still in the organization. And this was really, you are one of the persons who were inspiring you, because we try to evolve more of this female comics art in Germany. This was very important for us.
And who would be the equivalent within Germany? Was there dare I say it, how do I put this, a senior, an artist around for a little bit longer, you looked up, who came before you? That's what I'll put it. Who was there in Germany? Was there somebody in Germany?
There was one, yeah. This was very important, Anke Feuchtenberger.
I don't know who that is. Oh, Anke Feuchtenberger,
yes,
oh my gosh. Well, she was your tutor, wasn't
she? She was my professor. And Anke Feuchtenberger, she started teaching when I was studying in Hamburg. So she was quite young then, 35, I think, and she was doing this very experimental and art comics, and this was smashing. I mean, this was so fantastic to see a whole new world, and she inspired a generation of new comics artists, not only female, of course, yeah, like Arne Belsdorf, Sascha Haumer, also Nina Hofen, a lot of these new. Well, now we are not any more new. There's more generations now. Yeah,
this is how it grows.
This was very important also for us female comics artists, because we saw, okay, this is somehow she had topics and, well, kind of narrations or so that we could go into.
If you haven't discovered Anke Feuchtenberger, you absolutely must. It's fantastic work. Yeah. So for English people in the audience here, there are some, we were puzzled, but your new German word for today is gift, which does not mean gift at all. It means poison. How on earth the English word gift becomes poison in German? That's one of the most wonderful things about language, isn't it? I'm giving you a gift for Christmas.
It is also, well, a coincidental connection to the story, because this story is about a female murderer in the 19th century in Bremen, who killed her almost whole family and neighbors and so on, and it was really with kind of presents, I mean, which means gift, because she gave them something to eat and medicine, pretending that she wanted to do something good. And these were little breads with a special butter with red poison, so in it. So this was this Mäusebutter, and this was her weapon. And well, I just flip a little bit through.
We can see obviously the technique you're using is quite is connected to Anke Feuchtenberger, who uses lots of charcoal and atmospheric.
I'm still inspired by her technique. So this cooperation with the writer was for me very important, because it was my first longer book. It was 200 pages, and we discussed and developed the script together all the time, while 2 years. So it was a long work, and I learned a lot also. And there's some fictive parts and some historical parts from researching these archives, files, the files of the case. Exactly. So Pierre did a huge work doing that.
Research, yeah.
And just go and flip a little bit.
I know at the back of the book I noticed that there are portraits from the period, aren't there, of of the killer.
Most of the people are real people, have been real people, but there's just one. And one of the main protagonists, who is a fictive person, this is, Peer developed kind of a narrator, a female narrator, who comes into the city of of Bremen, so what you see here on the picture, and who is somehow investigating this case. So this was necessary, of course, because the main person itself, the Gesche Gottfried, this serial killer, she is not, it was not possible really to come close to her, because
now that's interesting, isn't it? Because I can see an echo with your work, Posy, because in Gemma Bovary, of course, you've got really the main narrator is Joubert the baker. It's not, it could so easily have been Gemma in the first person telling her story, and you had that decision, like Barbara, to go and the writer. How do you tell someone's story with another character as the narrator?
To begin with, I did it in the third person, as in Flaubert, but not as in Flaubert. I did 3 episodes in that voice, which was so bad. And it was only then, when I was writing The Baker, that who's French, that I was doing it in my head, parce qu'il parle un peu comme ça, and I was doing rather sort of French English in my head, and I found it quite easy, and then I found his voice, but I also needed, he became the narrator, but I also needed Gemma's voice, so I had that in the diaries, so her diary is there.
So how does forgive me, the name of the lady, the killer in Gift again?
Gesche Gottfried.
Gottfried, Gesche Gottfried. Do we see her? She doesn't become a narrator, does she? She's more an actor.
We
do we hear her thoughts as well?
Here, you see her like that. Yeah. So she remains very
secret, cryptic.
Yeah. Because nobody really knew what her reasons have been for doing that. This is a very strange thing. So
presumably the archives will include the court case.
Yes, that's right.
Where in theory there would have been some cross-examination, but nothing. Did anything become clear?
Secretly. It actually not really, because she kind of was several persons. She was very believing in God, for example. She was really, it's this. There's a word for that, Münchhausen syndrome. That how you know that? Yeah. So caring for people and making them at the same time ill again, to not to lose them. I think this is one part of that. So they are always dependent. Dependent of you. I think this is probably one reason. One explanation, but of course this case was in the beginning of 19th century, so the psychology was just invented, so this was one of the first cases where at all thoughts about this psychology, so it was a little, I think, no, Freud came later, so but So the narrator in the book, she's a writer, a young writer, and she asked the questions actually. So she's, well, perhaps a little bit she stands a little bit for the reader himself to ask the questions which the reader will have. So she's a necessary person for that.
And I suppose you were saying, I mean, here you've got a nice sequence of silence just there, that previous page, that which, as we know in comics, can be so evocative. It's not a page you read quickly. You can go into the mood of it all as she looks out at you. Yeah, beautiful.
And but in the book, it's not only focusing on this reasons or case itself, but it's also about the society around. This was, I think, even more important. Why 20 years when they these murders have been why 20 years? So she did it once a year, and so the people died around her. A lot of people died around her, and actually nobody noticed. Because it was much easier to say, oh, she's such a nice person and so on, and she cares about everybody, and she's so unlucky because everybody dies.
And there was a lot of death, wasn't there, at that time, and people didn't live so long. There was slightly more.
Of course.
Less surprising, perhaps, yes.
How was she discovered?
In the end, I have to remember. I think in the end it was just too much, too many
coincidences. Yes.
Yeah. So
nothing to do with me.
And somehow she was very relieved to get trapped. She was relieved. So yes. to have an empathize. She was relieved, and she was so they said she was not. She agreed to. In the end, she gets. Sorry, I'm stumbling now. I show it.
Yeah.
That is better. So it is an open Hinrichtung. Perhaps somebody can help.
Execution.
Thanks a lot. Execution in the end.
Oh, execution.
Yes. I will show that.
Was she hung?
No, she was
Beheaded. Decapitated.
guillotined.
Guillotined, yeah.
So it's here. We have that
In
here.
Bremen, I guess. Was it in Bremen she was executed?
It was in Bremen, at the main
In the main square.
square, and 10,000 people came. It was like a Volksfest, and it was the big sensation. Everybody came, and so what they said is that she was relieved to go to death there, but. And also I tried to catch these scenes, which are also researched by the author.
Again, those silent panels are so evocative, aren't they? I mean, it's obviously, if there's anything but silent, there was the noise of the crowds, it would be an insane place. And then to have those silent images just...
Yeah. In the end, there was a silence. So it's written in some of these old newspapers. So that there's one quotation that somebody said. Well, afterwards, so it was when she was killed. There was a silence all over the place, and then people went away and said, "Well, it was a bit uncomfortable, don't you think so?" And
is this story quite well known? I mean, in Germany, but people know
the Gische Gottfried story. Yeah, I didn't know it actually when I started with that, but I think in the northern part of Germany, and of course in Bremen, everybody knows her. Yeah. She's kind of the Bremen witch. So there's still a stone in Bremen where people spit on, to show their disgust about that, and still it's kind of a tradition. So, it's very strange. And then people walk by and do that. I think most of them don't know really about the thing. It's just you see in the travel guides, you see that this is you do that at this place.
But you really, with this book, you were seeking to let people perhaps empathise a bit, or try to see that she wasn't possibly just a very disturbed, sad woman.
I didn't try to do that. I think she was a murderer, so this is very serious. I didn't want to try to emphasize with the murder, but I think what we both tried, the author and me, was to ask questions, and then the reader is of course free to emphasize. So this is also with the next book. I mean, it's. So we also didn't judge in that book, but we didn't excuse it at the same time. So it was raising questions and also look on the society around that. I mean, this was this historic society. It was like a mini drama in itself. Yeah. How do they react and they don't react, and when do they react, and afterwards everybody said, I always knew it, and so on. So this is something what interests me.
There's a connection. We have Eddie Campbell in the audience just here, who was the artist on From Hell by Alan Moore. And there's a connection there, I think, because both of you have done period murder stories, and
of course this was an inspiration.
making the reader feel that they're really there in the kind of gritty, ordinary reality of it, not so glamorizing it at all. We should come on to Amina now. Do you think, should we do that? I think we have that. Now this, by the way, the good news is that finally Barbara will be published in English. It's not completely official yet, I don't think, but it nearly is. Amina's going to come out next year in English from Self-Made Hero. That's a British publisher. And I've read the French edition, and I can read a bit of German, I'm better in French. And it really is a great, great book. And this is significantly, of course, is Barbara working herself on her own story, not working with another writer. So, as you said, I guess the gift for you was in many ways a kind of training ground in taking on a long story, and then you plunged into doing something very ambitious, but based at least partly on your own, on a family background, family story. Yes,
Yeah. Well, this was the longest work I did up to now, so it cost me 3 or 4 years, because not only developing the stories, the dramaturgy and so on, but also doing the research. And it was an idea I was carrying for several years ago already. And my grandmother, she died 20 years ago, and around 10 years ago I found some part of her heritage, remains, not heritage, so part of her things, diaries, photographs and so on. But it was just like for the book, so I read it, and it also raised a lot of questions, and these parts of well, she did like a diary, a journal, there were letters, there were also part of what she told me when she was alive, but also things she didn't tell me, which was even more important in the end, because it's also about what was not told. The book is a lot of...
As so often with sort of family histories and family secrets, an awful lot of things are kept in the cupboard, aren't they? Skeletons in the cupboard, as we say.
And how I used these parts of her biography was, well, you can imagine it like a little bit like a puzzle. There were parts I had, and there were a lot of parts I didn't have, because I didn't know. And then, moreover, I never wanted to do a biography. I always wanted to do a novel, a comic novel.
So you weren't under any
have liberty.
You weren't under the pressure of having to be truthful and accurate.
Not necessarily.
No.
Actually, in the end, lots of parts are. There's nothing bigger one what is really invented. So the basic parts are from her biography. Of course, I thought about just not to say that that the inspiration came from her story, but actually I feel that perhaps people say, why do you invent something like that? So I had that. So this is written that I wrote into the book that it's part inspiring, part of the life of my friend. And
show us pictures, yes. I mean, what's impressive to me about the book, many things impress me, but is the fact that we follow your grandmother's life right through her life. We actually see what happens to her, and the decisions, perhaps not always the best decisions that she makes. And you portray her certainly early on quite subtly, clearly as a woman who doesn't seem to understand what's going on, as many people perhaps didn't at the time in Germany, with the rise of Hitler and fascism. That she seems to be oblivious to. Seems to be oblivious. She's unaware of what's really going on.
Yes, but she is. But at the same time, she could have known, because she is. So well, just to introduce into the story, it's told in 3 parts, and the first part is taking place in England, and so the young Emina, what's not the name of my grandmother, the young Emina, the protagonist, she leaves Germany with 19, not because of political reasons, but because she wanted to make come in her own shoes, I think you say. So to have to get a job. She was seeking for social elevation and also for liberty for herself. So she also wanted to be very self-dependent.
Yeah. Self-confident.
So she was she was a modern woman,
yes.
kind of, yeah. So this is where we see her now. She is crossing the English Channel. She's very young, and she comes to England, and it is 1934. So in Germany, Hitler is already 1 year in power, and also England was a place where democracy was threatened from different sides. Yeah, and the first part is about that she is she gets to know a young man. It's him. She gets to know Howard, and Howard is one of the first black Oxford students, and he comes from Barbados, the Caribbean island, and he is, of course, they both have very different reasons and backgrounds to be there in England, but they have something in common. So this is the seeking for liberty and independence, and also not really feeling welcomed in England. Of course,
the racism towards black people.
Reasons,
yes.
and she. Well, part of her character is like that she is not really able to ich sag's in Deutsch, ja genau. Sie ist relativ stur, stubborn. She's very like, and not so much confident to people. She's not open actually. But also she is, for her it's a bit difficult because people of course ask why did she come to England? Is she coming because she had to flee? Or is she coming because, why is she coming? Is she a Nazi? And the problem is that she just don't have an attitude and an opinion about that. She's always just like, well, I don't have to do with that. I don't have to do anything with that. I don't want to speak about Germany. That is not my thing, and I don't want to speak about politics. This is, of course, a problem also for the two of them, who get to know each other and also get to love each other. And but it's of course difficult because she's not really. She doesn't have a political standing.
No, she's quite immature in the sense.
She's naive.
Yes, naive,
yeah.
exactly. Yeah. And do you have documents? Do you have some of the letters that from your grandmother, between your grandmother and this?
No,
Howard?
I don't have.
Nothing.
But
no letters from Howard or
no,
the equivalent.
but I met relatives of him.
Did
so you? He died too. But and so I'm very sure that there are letters, and so I did them. I quoted letters. I
adapted them.
Yeah, I invented. But I have a photograph of him. He's a famous man, so I have his biography is much more.
Did you have photographs of your grandmother when she was young, from right through her life? I guess you refer to.
Of course.
That's wonderful to have those. Yeah. So should we just let people get a broad sense of how the story moves in the three parts? I know we start in London, don't we? And then, of course, eventually, comes back to.
This is London. I've been very quickly now, and so then a lot of things happen. She's 2 years in England. A lot of things happen, and in the end, she thinks that she has to go back to Germany. It's also because of political reasons, but it's also because she is still kind of stubborn, and she doesn't feel. Her plans didn't succeed in England like she wanted it, and then she's kind of trotzig,
rebellious,
kind of that, and says, okay, if you don't want me, I go back to Germany. I want to do some money, and then I can return.
Right.
She wants to return, but she won't. She won't. It's 1937. She's there in Germany, and Howard doesn't send any letters anymore. And she starts working there. It's in the Kriegsministerium, the War Ministry, and so she step by step. She steps into National Socialism society, and this is very.
It shows really perhaps the way that you can suddenly sort of accept this system and become part of it without maybe thinking it through.
Without maybe thinking it through, but she thinks for herself. So she wants to have some social.
She's always wanted to improve.
And since she understands that she can't have a career herself, she marries a Nazi architect, who promises her to have a career and climb the social ladder.
Exactly.
And so this main part, everything's taking place in Berlin. This is I focused on two things. It's about looking away. So this is what she does.
Ignoring.
Not thinking it through, but ignoring, looking away from the crimes, the visible crimes against Jews, the National Socialist crime, and getting part of the system and also profiting from the system, because of course her husband he's not only Nazi architect, he's an SS man, and the second focus is about speechlessness, not speaking about, which is part of this looking away. So they don't speak about what happens around them. They don't speak about the couple don't speak about, doesn't speak about, and also.
I think we are running out. We won't want to give away the whole story.
Sorry. Okay.
So I think we have to say there is a third part, and we won't want to give too much more away. But I hope that if you haven't read Amina, that has piqued your interest. I can tell you, it is as you can see, a beautiful graphic novel and a very emotional and evocative one. And it is one of the best, I think, that's come out this year in Germany. I'm sorry, we are, I think, over time, almost on time. So you can, of course, ask these two lovely ladies questions. Go and meet them at the Reproduct stand. I think you're doing signings and things probably today at some point. But can I please ask you to thank Posy Simmonds and Yelin?